Hello, I'm Thomas Grochowski from St. Joseph's College, New York, and my paper is entitled, Mobilize, Reevaluating Enzensberger's Theory in the Internet Age. As recently as the late 1990s, public intellectuals could speak both admiringly and dubiously of the ideas the German poet-critic Hans Magnus Enzensberger put forth in his famous essay, Constituents of a Theory of the Media, first translated into English and published by New Left Review in 1970, and included as part of a collection of his essays on similar topics, The Consciousness Industry. At a symposium held by the editors of Salmagundi in 1997, Christopher Hitchens was first to characterize Enzensberger's essay as both prescient and dated. The intellectuals gathered to discuss the question of the essay's relevance some 30 years later seem remarkably unaware of the cultural shakeup that was around the corner in the 21st century. The debate has continued for the last 15 years about the question of the Internet as a new form of democracy, or more precisely, the relationship between what Paul Levinson very awkwardly calls new media and democratic practices. I want to cite a few very brief examples of the ways the newer media systems are being used today, in much the manner that Enzensberger describes, a means of decentralizing the old media model and creating at least a partially emancipatory use of media. First, I want to briefly outline some of the key points of Enzensberger's essay. While the 1997 symposium critics are correct to question Enzensberger's moral equation of the two sides of the Cold War vis-a-vis the political economy of media control, I would nevertheless suggest his fundamental understanding of the infrastructure of what we might call now old media is quite valid. The dominant model in the old Soviet system and in the Cold War era capitalist system was that of broadcasting. Few transmitters, many receivers. Such a model correctly assesses the means by which information was carefully managed during the Cold War. Enzensberger also gets it right in his critique of leftist media analysis, which sees the system as wholly corrupt and the media technology itself as inherently manipulative and dangerous. Think of post-May 1968 Cahiers du Cinema film theory. This refusal on the part of the left, especially the Marxists, with the exception of Walter Benjamin, to fully understand 20th century media prevents them from engaging with it, from using it in productive ways. Intellectuals, both left and right, understood the subversive potential for new media, television's relationship to the end of South African apartheid, for example, but little was said about transforming the media infrastructure itself. It was not as if black South Africans, or for that matter, African Americans in the 1950s, were suddenly given control of television stations, but rather the networking of information across the country could permit, to some degree, a richer understanding of the horrific nature of racial segregation. For Enzensberger, the fully emancipatory use of electronic media is decentralized. Rather than being the work of authorized experts, professional journalists, government authorities, emancipatory media is a collaborative process involving the citizenry at large. The model is not one of broadcasting, but telephony, a two-way structure where all receivers can transmit and provide feedback. Rather than a depoliticized public sphere, what is created is a political learning process that creates mobile citizens. This is a key term for Enzensberger. To mobilize is not merely to propagandize. Mobility is liberating. Propagandizing thinks of citizens as parcels to be pushed around. To structure the new electronic media around mobility and telephony, sounds familiar, creates a system that becomes virtually impossible for any singular monolithic authority to control. Obviously, Enzensberger's ideas have become cited in various writings on new media. This essay continues to be anthologized in the context of the contemporary media landscape. I'll briefly look over three different examples of how we might apply Enzensberger's ideas. The first is the media representation of SARS in China. The second is the internet campaigns of Howard Dean and Barack Obama. And the third is the Occupy Wall Street movement. In November 2002, the first cases of SARS were being reported in the Guangdong province. The Chinese public was not informed of the growing epidemic for weeks after the first cases turned up. On the one hand, the provincial government was taking firm control over the information flow, but on the other, in classifying medical reports top secret, local authorities also created a situation where Beijing was not entirely aware of what was happening. Eventually, the national government declared that public discussion of SARS would be a breach of national security, and thus the official news blackout was firmly in place. For about 3 months, therefore, no public official health statements were being made either by Beijing or the local government regarding SARS. Despite possessing the enforcement machinery to control information, the provincial and national governments were really unable to maintain full control. This was the case because of the spread of information about it. On February 8th, text messages began to circulate discussing the virus, referred to in some messages as a strain of bird flu. Many citizens took photographs of SARS patients and shared them directly to the social photography site Flickr. Wired magazine had a brief mention of this. I'm still actually looking for the citation. My apologies. This use not only of the technology but of the infrastructure of a global electronic public space challenged the official messages coming from Beijing. The party certainly has maintained its control since SARS, and several people, in fact, were arrested for supposedly spreading false rumors via text concerning the disease. China continues to suppress the internet very heavily, as we know. Their grip has remained quite firm, as one House report on the media and SARS indicates. Nevertheless, such use of cell phones and social media illustrates the subversive potential of electric media, representing a means of conveying information outside the dominant structural model. While China certainly has the force to suppress or contain subversive practices like this may not be the case in the long term. Consider the Soviet Union example, although the Soviets didn't have a lot of American IOUs. The most powerful weapon of control, as Manuel Castells observes, is the self-censorship. The creating of a culture of fear leaves citizens and journalists less likely to step out of line. However, in the last 20 years, China has seen the newspaper industry explode in the private sector. Whatever the results of the arrests of those who sent text messages about SARS, the activity on the internet nevertheless forced the government to make more public statements about what was happening. Such mobilization may prove more effective than Tiananmen Square in altering the regime. Now I'd like to talk briefly about the internet campaigns of 2004 and 2008. The first presidential campaigns of the 21st century saw two somewhat marginalized politicians achieve substantial popularity. The 2004 campaign has been dubbed the Internet election, the first where the web played a significant role. By 2004, over 60% of Americans used the Internet, as opposed to just under 25% 10 years earlier. Tens of millions of Americans use the Internet for a range of activities pertaining to the campaign, researching candidate positions, even blogging extensively. The major Democratic candidates built websites, but Howard Dean was the most successful of these early on. The team didn't use merely the web to broadcast information, but used it to receive instant feedback, and of course, most famously, used the new medium to raise funds, setting a record for a one-quarter fundraising period for any Democratic Party candidate, most of which came from small donations received online. Dean himself clearly embraced the notion of feedback so important to Enzensberger's emancipatory model. What we've given people is a way to shout back, and we listen. The language that Gary Wolfe uses in his article in Wired magazine to describe the campaign also resonates with Enzensberger. One of the reasons for the success of the Dean candidacy was a willingness to let a decentralized network of supporters play a tactical role. That's a key term, decentralized network of supporters. As we know, Dean's campaign ultimately failed. He did not succeed in Iowa, and at his concession speech, he made his famous scream that was picked up by the mainstream media, and that led to his fading fast. But the use of the internet paved the way for Barack Obama. From the Obama Girl YouTube sensation in 2007 to his excellent management team, Obama early in 2008 was able to successfully challenge Senator Hillary Clinton. Unlike Howard Dean, Obama won Iowa, and while the campaign was a protracted struggle for the next several months, ultimately Obama won out and, of course, winning the White House. Obama could not have gone as far as he had, as quickly as he did, without the new media. Huffington Post founder Arianna Huffington, speaking at the Web 2.0 conference, observed that Obama would not have even been the nominee had it not been for the internet. Obama first used the medium of television to stake his place in the Democratic Party, delivering the keynote speech at the 2004 convention. He quickly parlayed this into success in the print medium with the republication of his 1995 memoir and a new title, The Audacity of Hope. Obama was successful across a range of media platforms. Where John Kennedy had been telegenic, Obama was more than that. He was cybergenic. Because he looked good on television, that also translated well to YouTube, unlike this thing probably will. Obama's team very shrewdly used YouTube and received millions of hours of hits at the candidate's official YouTube channel. According to Howard Dean's campaign manager, Joe Trippi, to have purchased the amount of exposure that Obama got via YouTube would have cost $47 million. This large amount of free exposure mobilized younger voters who were more likely to be on the web than older ones, and the youth vote, as we know, was very crucial in Obama's victory. John Kerry in 2004 was unable to mobilize enough youth to defeat President Bush. Obama's successful use of the internet did not, however, wholly transform democratic politics in America. There is no question that Obama's success was historic, Those who marched with Dr. King in Alabama didn't think they'd live to see a man of color become president. But Obama has largely proven to be a centrist politician who has had a tough go of it since the 2010 elections swept a lot of Tea Party Republicans into the House. The Republicans' failure to defeat Obama in 2012 is as likely due to the GOP's alienation of, well, pretty much everyone who is not an over 35 white heterosexual man, as it is due to the president's use of the internet to keep mobilizing his supporters. The 2012 campaign was very much about attacking the Republicans, who admittedly made it easy by saying stupid things that got circulated over the social media that was really non-existent when Howard Dean ran in 2004 and was growing very rapidly in 2008. But it is the new media of Facebook and Twitter that we can see the decentrist possibilities of real activist mobilization. That brings me to my last example, the Occupy Wall Street movement and the decentralization of the radical movements of the time. Occupy, which relies substantially on the new media, is attempting to create Enzensberger's ideal structure. Because it refuses to set up a massive organizational bureaucracy, it engages in decentralized power relations. While the mainstream media has critiqued it for not having a clear message, part of the objective of Occupy is to refuse to engage in the rhetorical battles of previous movements. They seek a range of approaches to problems. They engage in a range of activities from associating itself with the strike debt movement, and also in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, Occupy has breathed new life into itself. It has been consistently more effective than traditional relief organizations in getting help to people who need it in the wake of the hurricane. What Occupy was aiming to create was an open communication system where all could voice their thoughts. Occupy was able to build off more recent activist movements of the early internet age and mobilize more people even by using Facebook and Twitter. Where it would have been the hardcore activists doing most of the work and dominating the discourse in the 90s, Occupy gained greater numbers with its use of the social media. The social media also became a powerful tool in the transformation of the narrative. Images and videos of the confrontations with police at various Occupy demonstrations increased public awareness of the movement and often contradicted the mainstream media coverage, which was then altered again. Police tactics were being more openly questioned, especially, most notoriously, the use of pepper spray. In 1991, just to give some context, when George Halliday videotaped LAPD officers beating Rodney King, he could not upload the video to a social media website and let it go viral. He went instead to the local news station, who aired the footage and allowed that to be circulated through other news stations and networks. This video, which directly contradicted the official police report filed by the officers who beat King, became a pivotal moment for activists who began urging demonstrators to bring camcorders to protest as a kind of protection from police brutality. But the video of King's beating was circulated by the television news networks. The images of police officers pepper spraying demonstrators is not controlled by the broadcast media. They exist in a wide electronic public sphere, limiting the ability of the authorities to maintain the basic broadcast model of media infrastructure. A crucial element of Occupy is that it's about process, very much what Enzensberger says. It's not simply about singular events. It's not about putting together particular candidates for offices. By rejecting traditional social organization structures, Occupy uses the new decentralized social media to create a mobilized citizenry aiming to accomplish a range of objectives. Though the movement has had some dissipation, it remains a vital force in media activism and will continue its efforts to use the media to bring about justice for more of the citizenry. Just a few final thoughts here. In an essay I published in Television and New Media on the role of the internet in disseminating information about the O.J. Simpson murder trial, I expressed some pessimism as to the real potential of citizen journalism. Noting how the personal websites devoted to the case had devolved, I suggested that such a use of cyberspace will be as marginalized as ham radio operators had become a generation earlier. My inspiration for that analogy, of course, was Enzensberger. What has happened in the decades since my article's publication is that an entire new infrastructure has emerged. Not only is more of the nation and world wired, but wireless and mobile. I'm a bit more optimistic at the prospect of increased mobilization of the public sphere for more meaningful change. Thank you.